Judge Emily Carter was known for her reputation, tough and no-nonsense in the courtroom. While many admired her for being fair, there was also word that she tended to cloud judgments with assumptions. She held the weight of decisions in her hands, and sometimes used her authority like a gavel above the lives of many standing before her. This Monday morning was no different. Judge Carter walked into her courtroom with confidence that seemed almost impenetrable. Today, she had no reason to think it would be any different until Aaron Blake walked through the door. The case appeared simple enough. A man named Aaron Blake was accused of damaging property in an upscale neighborhood and had come to face the charges. Judge Carter looked briefly at the file. The complainant, Mr. Peterson, described Aaron as a menacing figure who had disregarded all rules. To Judge Carter, it seemed like an open and shut case, another troublemaker who needed to be taught a lesson. As Aaron made his way toward the defendant's table, Judge Carter eyed him coldly. He was calm, his posture respectful, yet she already had a feeling of déjà vu that she knew how this story ended. "Mr. Blake," Judge Carter began, her voice echoing through the courtroom, "you stand accused of property damage in a private neighborhood. This community prides itself on upholding the rules, and your behavior is in clear violation." Her gaze hardened, daring him to challenge her. Aaron did not bat an eyelid. His face showed no emotion. He was respectful. "Your Honor, there has been some misunderstanding," he said calmly. Judge Carter frowned. "A misunderstanding? The evidence presented by Mr. Peterson is clear. You are being fined $100,000 for damages." There was no room for doubt in her tone. Aaron didn't flinch. Instead, he looked up and said, "With all due respect, Your Honor, I had permission onto that property, and I did nothing to damage anything therein. If need be, I will show my documents in regard thereto." His voice came out with a bit of firmness to it that got the attention of the entire courtroom. The less than impressed Judge Carter raised an eyebrow. "Permission? For what, exactly? Are you trying to tell me you were there for legitimate reasons?" she asked, the tone almost mocking. Aaron nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I am a federal prosecutor. I was on that property as part of an ongoing investigation." The courtroom fell silent, the murmur of the audience dying out instantly. Judge Carter's eyes narrowed to study him, her expression faltering for a moment before hardening again. "A federal prosecutor, you say?" she repeated, her voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I have the documentation right here and would appreciate the opportunity to present it," Aaron said, his politeness still intact. Judge Carter demurred, then gave a wave of his hand. "Very well. Proceed." Aaron passed a file to his attorney, who went forward to the bench. Judge Carter flipped through the papers. Her face grew more guarded with every page. The documents were official, bearing clear authorization signed by the property management company and Aaron's federal department. They provided irrefutable evidence that he was, in fact, on the property for a legitimate investigation. Judge Carter's fingers closed around the documents tighter as her jaw clenched. She looked up, refusing to back down. "Mr. Blake, aside from permission, you are apparently out of order in front of the community's rules and caused a disturbance. The complainant, Mr. Peterson, insists you were there without his knowledge and caused considerable damages." Aaron met her gaze level. "Your Honor, I wish to call witnesses who can confirm no harm was done and that my being there was completely legal," he said. Judge Carter felt the weight of the courtroom's eyes upon her, judging every action she was making. She hesitated and nodded her head grudgingly. "Very well, proceed." First to testify was Lisa Torres, a member of Aaron's team. She took the stand without any foreboding and spoke in a crystal-clear voice. She described how they conducted themselves professionally with the assurance that their investigation did not interfere with the community in any way. They took photographs and documented every step with caution and respect toward the property. Are you prepared to testify that no damage occurred? Pressed Judge Carter, her tone incredulous. Absolutely, Your Honor, Lisa responded with no hint of doubt. Next, Aaron's attorney called Frank Mitchell, an experienced investigator. He corroborated Lisa's testimony, emphasizing that at no point had Mr. Peterson, the complainant, even been present during the investigation. His testimony was thorough, leaving no room for speculation. Judge Carter's face twisted into one of increasing tension. The weight of evidence was overloaded on one side, but she did not want to appear to be backing down. She glanced to the back of the courtroom as Mr. Peterson stood, flustered and defensive, and walked back to the stand, his face red with determination. Mr. Peterson, you claimed there was damage, Judge Carter said, eyeing him keenly. Describe exactly what you saw. Mr. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. Well, I didn't see it directly. My assistant told me about the damages. He showed me some pictures, he stammered. Aaron's attorney leant forward. Is your assistant present here today? Can he corroborate your claims? Mr. Peterson was taken aback, his eyes darting nervously. No, he's not here today. But I trust his word. So your testimony is completely secondhand, and you don't have any direct evidence? Aaron's attorney asked calmly. Well, yes, but Mr. Peterson started, before being cut off by the lawyer. Are you aware, Mr. Peterson, that Mr. Blake had full permission from both your property management company and the Department of Justice to be on that property? Mr. Peterson looked shocked, his mouth opening and closing without a word. The courtroom remained deathly silent as the tension grew palpable. Judge Carter cleared her throat. The discomfort was clear to everyone present. She turned back to Aaron. Mr. Blake, based on the evidence reviewed and testimonies given, it would appear that the case against you is largely unsubstantiated. I hereby dismiss all charges. You are free to go. Aaron inclined his head respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. But just as Judge Carter was going to adjourn the case, Aaron's lawyer spoke again. Your Honor, since false charges have been leveled against my client, we wish to turn the table around on Mr. Peterson for filing fraud charges. Gasps resounded throughout the courtroom. Judge Carter's brows furrowed, and she looked sideways at Mr. Peterson, whose face had taken on an ashen pale hue. She nodded slowly. Under the circumstances, I feel it appropriate to recommend that Mr. Peterson's actions be further investigated. Making false claims is a serious matter, especially about an officer of the federal government. This court is adjourned. The gavel's echo had barely died down when the courtroom started to clear. Whispers and hushed tones ran rapid with comments on the turn of events. Aaron gathered his things, his attorney smiling reassuringly. Today, justice had pulled through, and he was victorious with his dignity intact. Outside, Aaron was confronted by a sea of reporters seeking a statement. He took a deep breath, then spoke, his voice clear and steady. Today, justice was served. The truth requires but a pinhole of light to shine through. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a courtroom that had learned a vital lesson in equity and humility. Outside the courthouse, Aaron's attorney, James Porter, caught up with him. You handled that incredibly well, Aaron, James said, clapping him on the shoulder. Most people would have lost their cool under that kind of pressure. Aaron smiled faintly. I've learned that keeping calm is the only way to deal with situations like this. The truth will always come to light, eventually. James nodded. But we still should have someone follow through on the investigation concerning Mr. Peterson. Too eager to prove a claim that was mostly baseless. This is not the first time that we have seen such people try to take advantage of the system. Aaron let out a deep sigh. You are right. People like that should be brought to account, not necessarily for me, but for anyone else who may become the victim in the future of such an accusation. As they headed to the car, a reporter hurried over, microphone poised. "Mr. Blake, how do you feel about the investigation being opened on Mr. Peterson? Do you think he will be charged?" Aaron paused, picking his words carefully. "I think the facts speak for themselves. This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure that justice is served and that no one is above the law, not even those who would wish to manipulate that law for their purposes." James contributed, "We believe in the rule of law, and we are confident that the investigation will uncover the truth as it did today." The reporter nodded, jotting down their words and stepping back. Aaron and James continued to the car, the weight of the day slowly dislodging off their shoulders. It wasn't easy standing up against unfounded accusations, but Aaron knew it was necessary. Later that evening, Aaron went home, a feeling of relief washing over him. Maria greeted him at the door, her eyes red of concern. "How did it go?" she asked, embracing him. Aaron kissed her forehead. "It went well. The charges were dropped, and an investigation into Peterson has been recommended. Justice was done." Maria smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "I knew you'd make it through. You always do." Aaron hugged her tighter. "It wasn't just me. It was the team, evidence, and the truth. I just hope this serves as a lesson to people not to make accusations without a reason." Maria nodded. "I'm just glad you're home." She led him to the kitchen, where dinner was waiting. "Come on, you deserve a break after everything you've been through." They sat down to eat, and Aaron stared out the window, his mind still replaying the events of the day. He knew this wasn't the last time he would face challenges in his line of work, but today had reminded him why he did what he did. Justice wasn't always easy, but it was worth fighting for every single time. The next morning, Aaron received a call from James. "Just got word from the district attorney's office. They're moving forward with the investigation into Peterson. Looks like he's going to have to answer for his actions." Aaron nodded. A sense of satisfaction settled in. Good. People need to understand there are consequences for lying and manipulating the system. James laughed. "I have a feeling this case is going to set a precedent. Maybe it'll make people think twice before trying something like this again." Aaron smiled. "Let's hope so. One step at a time, right?" "Exactly," James replied. "Anyway, I just wanted to share the good news. It'll keep you updated as things progress." "Thanks, James." "I appreciate it," Aaron said before hanging up. As Aaron replaced the receiver, he felt his sense of purpose renewed. There was, of course, so much left to do, but today at least, justice had been served, and that would be enough to see him through. He took a deep breath, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that as long as he stood for the truth, he could handle anything that came his way. Later that week, Aaron received a subpoena to testify at Mr. Peterson's preliminary hearing. In a short amount of time, the investigation had progressed, and now it was Mr. Peterson's turn to answer for what he did. Aaron knew this was another major step toward justice being upheld, and was prepared to face whatever was needed to see it through. As the day of the hearing approached, Aaron once again entered a courthouse, this time not as a defendant but as a witness. The atmosphere was quite different, filled with suspense and justice. He entered the courtroom, sat down, and waited for the commencement of court activities. Mr. Peterson looked visibly nervous as he sat at the defense table, his attorney by his side. The prosecutor, a zealous woman named Claire Donovan, was the next to rise and begin presenting the case against him. She laid out the evidence clearly, how Mr. Peterson knowingly made the false claims, how he attempted to manipulate the judicial process, and how his actions caused harm not only to Aaron, but also to the integrity of the legal system. When it came time for Aaron to testify, he did so in the same clear and composed manner as he had during his own trial. He related the events that occurred, the investigation he was performing, and the unfounded nature of Mr. Peterson's accusations. His testimony was straightforward, highlighting the facts without embellishment. Claire Donovan continued by asking how such accusations had affected his life and career. Aaron spoke about the stress of it all, the reputation that was tarnished, and the fact that he needed to stand up to such actions. He knew this wasn't about him. It was about making sure the legal system isn't used to perpetuate a personal vendetta. Mr. Peterson's defense attorney attempted to question Aaron's testimony, but the evidence was overwhelmingly against him. The witnesses, documentation, and Aaron's composure while testifying made it clear what actually had taken place. The judge who heard the case listened intently, and the more that was heard that day, the clearer it became that Mr. Peterson did, in fact, have a case against him. By the end of the hearing, the judge declared that there was sufficient evidence to head to trial. Mr. Peterson stood defeated, the color having left his face as the realization of the severity of his circumstance set in. Aaron felt a sense of closure, knowledge that justice was taking its course, and Mr. Peterson would have to answer for his actions. As the hearing was adjourned, Claire Donovan approached Aaron. "Thank you for your testimony today, Mr. Blake. It's people like you who help keep the system working the way it's supposed to." Aaron shook her hand. "Thank you, Ms. Donovan. I just want to make sure no one else has to go through what I did. Justice is worth fighting for." She nodded. "And fight we will. This isn't over yet, but today was a good step forward." As he exited the courthouse, Aaron felt strong once more. The road to justice was seldom plain, and the obstacles seldom small. Today, however, as it had been before, he had stood for what was right, and that made all the difference. The more he walked, the more Aaron realized that his battle for justice was never about winning a case or proving people wrong. It was about carrying with him those values that defined him as a man, standing up against the abuse of power and being the guiding light of truth in a world that often sought to darken it. He took a deep breath, ready for whatever lay ahead, knowing as long as he stood for what was right, he could face anything.